All right. And this is good to say here, our final unit that we are going to be discussing this year is plants. All right, so this will take us throughout the end of the school year, our discussion on plants. Now, if it's like previous years, you probably haven't dealt with a whole lot of discussions on plants, have you? Most folks have not been around and have not discussed plants. Would you think that that would be an accurate statement? Okay. When you were in the middle school, did you hit plants? Because I know you didn't last year in physical science because that's not a life science. Okay. Do you remember in the middle school, did you hit plants? All right. Probably not. Okay, probably not. But nonetheless, we're going to talk a little bit these next few weeks on plants. Now, plant classification. How are plants classified? How are plants classified? Well, ladies and gentlemen, of the 1.6 million species of organisms identified by scientists, 350,000 of those are plants. They are located into the kingdom Plantae, and they are divided into 4 main groups or 4 main divisions. One is non-vascular mosses and liverworts. Another one are vascular ferns that reproduce with spores. Another one are vascular gymnosperms, which are conifers that have needle-like leaves and cones. Probably what's the most familiar gymnosperm that you've ever seen? Huh? Well, they have those. They have pine cones. What's probably the most most common conifer? Where do we always see it? Well, evergreen, yeah. Where do we use them, though? What holiday? Christmas. Your Christmas trees. If you have a live Christmas tree, it has needle-like leaves, doesn't it? My tree at home's fake. So I wouldn't necessarily, it's a conifer look-alike, but it's not real, so I can't call it a conifer. All right, how many people have live trees? Okay, did your live tree have needles that fell off? Yeah, you had to clean those up. It's kind of messy, a little bit. All right. So those gymnosperms are the conifers that have needle-like leaves and cones. Angiosperm. Vascular angiosperms are what we call the flowering plants. That is the most dominant division. I've got a whole flower bed on the side of my house right now that has different angiosperm in them. Okay? Some of them are roses. Okay, I've got tulips blooming right now. I've got some little green annual that are green. They're all green, but its flowers are purple. Okay? I call them my little grape plants because I don't know what they are. Okay, but they're purple. But I've got a number of different flowering plants that are growing in my flower beds right as we speak. Some of them are flowering, some of them are not. My roses, you cut down your roses and then they grow back up every year. Well, my roses right now are in the process of growing the different branches. Okay? So they won't be flowering just yet. I've got some shrubs too that I was a little bit worried about, because up until last week I thought they were dead because nothing was happening with them. Then all of a sudden, what's been happening the last week or two? The weather's been warming up a little bit more, right? All of a sudden, bam, these things are starting to grow leaves and stuff. So I said, okay, good. They're not dead. Okay, I didn't trim it yet because I thought I was going to have to pull the whole thing out. But no, it's starting to grow leaves right now. Okay, so these flowering plants that I have growing in my flower beds, the angiosperms. Now, let's talk a little bit about this first type, vascular plants. Okay, vascular plants are a group that has a system of tubes, roots, stems, and leaves to help them transport materials throughout the plant. In your vocab that you did for homework for today, you should have had something that's called the xylem and the phloem. So look on your other page right there. What is the xylem? Who can tell me what the xylem is? Fletcher? A vascular tissue that carries water from the roots to the stems and the leaves, right? So then what is the phloem? P-H-L-O-E-M, the phloem. Lewis? It carries food/sugar from the leaves to the rest of the plant. Okay? So, the water. Obviously, how does the plant get the water? Most of its water. Through its roots, right? So, most of that water is going up from the roots. What about the phloem? Where's the phloem going? From the leaves, right? Who does the photosynthesis? The leaves produce the photosynthesis. We talked about that earlier in the year. So the leaves are undergoing photosynthesis. They're making the sugar, right? So that sugar goes from the leaves down, back through the branches, the stems, okay, the tree trunk, if you will, if it's bigger. Okay, so the phloem goes from the leaves down. Okay? Vascular plants reproduce asexually through spores and vegetative propagation. Now, what that is? Vegetative propagation. You have that in your vocab, right? An asexual reproduction of small part of a plant that breaks off and forms a new part. Okay? My mom, matter of fact, I just saw her this weekend. Okay? And she said she had something she called a butterscotch plant. Okay? She said, "You want some butterscotch?" And I thought she was talking about cookies myself, but she was talking about butterscotch plants. I said, "Yeah, I'll take some cookies." She said, "No, I'm not talking about cookies. I'm talking about this plant right here. You want to start off of it." So she was going to break off a little bit of that plant to give to me so I could plant it. Okay? So that would be vegetative propagation. Now, plants, these vascular plants can also reproduce sexually through pollen, and ovules, which we'll talk about when we talk about plant reproduction. Okay? Through pollen, which is the sperm, and the ovules, which are the eggs of the plant. Now, non-vascular plants, our second group. Non-vascular plants. Okay? They are low to the ground plants that get materials directly from their surroundings. They don't have vascular tissue, so they can't take water from the roots and pump it all the way up to the leaves. Okay? They don't have those tubules. They don't have that transport system. So does that make sense that they got to be lower to the ground? Okay? They get their materials directly from their surroundings. They have small, like structure called rhizoids. Now you should have that in your vocab too. Small root-like structures that are found in vascular plants, the rhizoids. They undergo asexual reproductive by vegetative propagation, and they also undergo sexual reproduction using something that we call spores. Now, examples include bryophytes, which are hornworts, liverworts, and mosses. Okay, so these bryophytes, okay. Has anybody ever seen moss growing on a tree? Or maybe it could grow on a rock, maybe? But you've seen moss before, right? Would you say moss is pretty low to the ground? Yeah. Gymnosperm, we call these the needle-like leaves. The gymnosperm are vascular plants. If you're a vascular plant, what should you already be able to tell me? That they have what? Which are called? What are the names of the tubes? The xylem and the phloem. Okay? Xylem and phloem. So if they're a vascular plant, which they are, they have xylem, phloem. Stop and think about how big some of these trees are. Okay, they're a long way from the ground, so they have to have some way to get the water from the roots all the way up to the leaves. Okay, the gymnosperm are vascular plants whose seeds are not enclosed in an ovule or fruit. The name gymnosperm means naked seed. And the group typically refers to the conifers that bear male and female cones. They have needle-like leaves and are evergreens, which means that their leaves stay green year-round, and they do not drop their leaves during the fall and winter. Exceptions, okay, well, not really exceptions, but examples are pine trees. We all know pine trees. A ginkgo tree, which has its own special type of a flower that's very recognizable, and cycads. The next type of a plant we're going to talk about is the angiosperm. It is also a vascular plant. So can you tell me about an angiosperm? They have xylem and phloem. They have xylem and phloem. The angiosperm is a vascular plant whose mature seeds are enclosed in a fruit or an ovule. They are flowering plants that reproduce using seeds and are either perfect and contain both male and female reproductive structures, or what we call imperfect, which contain only a male or a female structure. Angiosperm trees are also called hardwoods, and they have broad leaves that change color and drop during the fall and the winter. Okay? So, those leaves change colors. What colors do we typically see when they change? An orangish color, a reddish color, yellowish color. Okay? Those are, why do we see green? Because of what? The pigment of the leaves. Okay? We see green. Now, that same pigment, okay, they don't go away. It's just they are not producing as much of their color. Okay? They're still there, and we might even read some stuff on that if we have the time. But the pigmentation changes. Okay? The pigmentation changes. But these other pigments are there. They're just not as dominant as what the green is. All right? We'll probably do a chromatography lab and maybe see some of the different pigmentations that are involved in these. Okay? But can we all think of a tree that loses its leaves? Okay, right now they ought to be gaining leaves, right? You look out at least at my house. Okay, what type of tree? Can anybody name a type of tree that'll drop their leaves? A maple. I got some maples growing in my front yard right now. Now, what are the seeds of the maple? Anybody know? The helicopters. Okay? Have you ever seen the helicopters falling down? What happens if those, I had it one year really, really bad because I didn't clean out my flower beds of all those helicopters before I mulched. Guess what happened? Okay? Those helicopters started to grow into maple trees, and I had about 300 of them in my flower beds that I had to pick out because I was growing maple trees. Why? Because I actually let them fall, and then when I planted them, I covered them and planted them. So that wasn't very fun. I learned my lesson that if I'm going to remulch, I'm going to make sure that I clean up all those helicopters because they'll seed themselves right there. Okay? But nonetheless, the different types, the angiosperms. Okay? Well, we're going to start with this tomorrow, but right there are non-vascular. We're going to talk about non-vasculars tomorrow, but here's a slide that has some of those that we were just talking about. The moss, the hornwort, and the liverwort. Okay?